Welcome to episode 120 of the How'd It Happen podcast, hosted by Mike Malatesta. In this episode, Mike welcomes John Burke, the president of Trek Bicycle, one of the most well-known and iconic brands in the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. As you heard in the introduction, today I have John Burke with me. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so first of all, I owe a debt of gratitude to your son Richie for setting this up. Richie Burke, who has been a friend of the show, and I've been a friend of his show, Go Getters podcast. You should check it out. He's doing some really, really great work. But anyway, he connected. Well, I actually heard John talking about his book on Richie's show, 16 Nonpartisan Solutions to Save America, and I thought to myself, I would love to get him on my show and talk about that and more. And back in February, I was able to attend a YPO event at Trek, where John gave just a phenomenal presentation about Trek and about how he thinks about business. And I wrote, 2 pages of notes, and I took pictures, and I bought the books, John.
Yeah, good.
Billion dollar coach, founder's mentality. You were talking about the Savannah bananas, and I was just all into it. So it's a lot of fun to finally get a chance to sit down and talk with you one-to-one. So John, I start every one of my shows the same way. It's with a simple question. How did it happen for you?
So, when I was in the 3rd grade, my mom took me and my 2 older sisters to Washington. And we went to Washington, and we went to the Capitol and the White House and the Smithsonian. And, I fell in love with America. And I've always been a student of American history, and I've always been interested in politics. And after graduating from college, I've been involved in business, and we've had some success here at Trek, and I take a look at some of the things our government does, and it just blows my mind. And I was at my son Richie's graduation from Marquette. I think it was in 2011. And David McCullough, the great American historian, was the speaker, the commencement address. And he said something at the end that really hit me. And he looked out at the graduates and he said, at some point, do something for your country. And so I drove back home that night and I thought to myself, what could I do for my country? And I have all these ideas on how I think the nation should be run. And I wrote a book, 12 Simple Solutions to Save America. And it came out in 2016. I did not save America. And I thought to myself, after the 2016 election, I thought, if somebody competent doesn't run for the office with a plan, that I'll just do it. And so I started on a journey of rewriting the book. And it came out as 16 Nonpartisan Solutions to Save America. And I called it the Presidential Playbook because if I had made the decision to run for president, the book would have been my plan. I think one of the problems we have as a country is nobody ever has a plan. So I was going to hand out the book. This is my plan for our country. And that's how it happened to me.
Okay. So when was it? So you started writing the book maybe 2018, the second book?
Probably 2018. Yep.
2018. And at that time, you were obviously thinking seriously about it enough to create a playbook for it. And it's 2020 and you're not running. So you determined along the way that you change a plan. What went into that, John?
I thought long and hard about running, and I talked to a number of people who are in this business, and they told me I had no chance. And I usually like to play games that I can win. And I thought I could make a difference. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to pass on running, but I'm still going to publish the book because one of my main objectives was to educate Americans. I myself thought my chances of winning were very low. I figured if I did get elected, I was extremely confident I could do the job. But there's so many hurdles to jump over, especially as an independent, that I thought it was an extreme long shot. But I thought there were so many great ideas in the book. And I really believe one of the problems we have in this country is that the citizens aren't educated. And we have leaders who dumb us down. And I thought the book should be published, and so I published the book.
Okay. And by dumbing us down, and I think we're gonna spend some time getting into these 16 solutions, because I read your first book, and then when this came after I heard John Ritchie, I got the second one. I read the second one, and so there's stuff worth talking about in there. That's for sure. But when you talk about not having a plan, and I don't know if you said dependency or that's my word, but it seems like there's a very, it seems like most of the people that go to Washington, D.C. are smart and are accomplished. You said, you were confident that you could run it. I'm sure you could. And I'm sure a lot of those people probably could too, if it was like a business. But there's so much sort of gravitational force, it seems like, to create dependency on the government or dependency on the person in office that, that perpetuates what happens there, right? It's not like even if I go and I really do want to make change, all of a sudden I get myself into this mess where everybody's doing favors for everybody. And then in order for me to do more favors, I have to get elected again. And so for me to get elected again, I have to create a dependency on me. I can't make people autonomous. I have to make them the opposite of that, because I don't know. How do you think about that?
Well, the way I think about that is I think there are a lot of people in this country, a lot of smart people who could do the job. Unfortunately, we haven't had one of those people in a long time. And I think the problem that we have is we have some incredibly smart people who run for the office, but in order to get elected, they don't want to offend people, and so they don't have a plan. Now, if you take a look at anything that's great, if we take a look at building something great, let's take a look at building a sports team. Let's take a look at building a great business, great nonprofit. They all come with a couple of things. One is it all requires hard work. And the second thing it requires is sacrifice. So if you want to build a great country, and you really, really want to build a great country, you need hard work and sacrifice from everyone involved. And what politicians have figured out is the way to get elected is to do the opposite.
Right.
It's to promise treats for everybody. I want your vote, and in return for your vote, I will ask nothing of you. And in fact, I'll give you a bunch of things.
I'll give you stuff, for free.
I'll vote for you. Okay,
Right.
well, that is a great strategy in the United States for getting elected, and it's a horrible way to build a great country. If your focus is, I want to get something for myself, over the short term, it's working out great. Give me a tax cut. Give me a new drug program. Give me free this. Okay. But if you want to build a long-term, enduring, iconic country, a great country that people look up to, like the one we used to have, that requires hard work and sacrifice. And when you talk about things like climate change, and when you talk about one of the worst transportation systems in the world, when you talk about a citizenry, as a group of citizens, we're the worst health in the industrialized world. We're the largest, besides China, we're the largest polluter in the world. And per capita, I'm sure we're the largest. And we have all these problems. We have more people in our prisons per 100,000 than anyone. We have 650 people in the United States per 100,000 in prisons. In Russia, it's 350. In the UK, it's like 75. In Germany, it's like 50. And in Japan, it's 20. And the results are horrible. And we just keep doing the same thing. And I really believe that there's an incredible opportunity for us to meet these challenges and take the country to a whole different level. And by doing that, you would improve everybody's lives, not only in this generation, but you would set up the next generation.
So two questions for you before we get into specifics. I guess on the first thing, promise, you'll take care of all their problems and gives people stuff for free. Why do people fall for that?
Because it's
because it doesn't work in their own life. Why would they fall for it with someone that's running for government?
It's easy. People like to hit the easy button. It's big, it's green, and hit the easy button. I mean, I'm going to vote for, you got two politicians standing up there. One guy says, I'm going to give you a tax cut. And the other guy says, I'm going to increase your taxes because all of our roads are falling apart and we need to fix the roads. People vote for the guy who says, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He says, I'm going to give you a tax cut and I'm going to pay for it by cutting all the ridiculous spending. And every time he cuts your taxes, and he never finds the ridiculous spending. And so you're $25 trillion in debt.
And is that, so I know it's a complicated thing, but is that because, he or she, whomever becomes president in the future, doesn't want to do it? Or is it because they run into this obstacle called the Senate and the House that are making these same kinds of promises to their own constituents to get elected? And they sensibility goes right out the window because they're not the ones that are going to have to, they're not personally on the hook for paying for anything. It's
actually worse.
Okay.
It's worse than that because what you have is, let's just take a Senate race. You have 100 senators, and the senators, those are very important votes, and they determine the decisions that this country makes on things like healthcare, or they determine things like how much money are we going to spend on defense. And so they run for office, and the way you win an election is by raising a lot of money. 85% of candidates who raise the most amount of money win. So if you want to run for Senate in a state, you're going to meet with some political consultants, and they're going to say, okay, here's what I need from you. I need you to raise a lot of money. You go, okay, well, I'll do that. Who do I call? And they're going to go, okay, well, first person you want to call is you want to call the health insurance companies because they make a fortune and they really want your support. So you call the health insurance companies and you go, can you donate to my political action committee? And the person goes, sure, just as long as we're going to get your support. And the person who wants to be a senator says, sure. So then they win and they get to become a senator. And then this is a fact. We spend more money per person than any country in the world on healthcare, almost 2x as much, and we get the worst results. And so that insurance company calls you up and they say, remember me, I donated to your campaign. I gave your political action committee $500,000. I need you to vote this way on the bill.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, when you run for re-election, I'm going to be there for you.
Yeah, there's another 500,000 coming your way.
And so if you take a look, I always thought the biggest lobbyists in Washington was the defense companies.
Yeah.
And if you look at a 20-year period from like 1996 to 2016, something like that, Defense Department spent $1.5 billion lobbying Washington, taking people out to dinner, doing all sorts of favors for them, flying them on trips. The healthcare industrial complex spent $5.8 billion in the same period of time. And that's what you're up against. And these are the kind of things that you're never going to hear about in a campaign. You hear, like President Trump will be out there and he'll say, we're going to drain the swamp. That was one of his huge rallying cries in 2016.
Yeah.
What has he done to drain the swamp? Nothing. Zero.
Yeah.
And he was right. We have a huge swamp. It's just
there to be drained. Yeah.
Nobody's ever drained it.
Right.
And in my opinion, nobody's ever really tried. And that was, one of the key things one of the reasons why if I ran, I was going to run as an independent was I was going to sit down and have that adult conversation with the American people as to here's where we are as a country. Here's where we can get to. And I need your help. It's going to be hard work and it's going to be sacrifice. But if we want to make this happen, it can easily happen. This country has so many great assets and it has so many talented people that all these problems are solvable. It's a matter of choices.
Right. But I want to, okay. So I'd like to explore a little bit more that couple year period between 2018 when you started writing the book and 2020. So you developed the plan, and you mentioned that talking to people, it was just not. It was very unlikely that you would win. So how does someone with good nonpartisan solutions to save America, how does that ever become a reality, John, in your mind? If it's just if it's difficult, nearly impossible to run and win as an independent, but also very, very challenging for a Democrat or a Republican to run on that with that playbook and win their constituents either. I mean, how do you get it done?
I think there's one of two ways. One is you get some. Well, there's probably a couple different ways, but you get some leadership who can educate the public and who can paint a picture of hard work and sacrifice and that it's worth it. And here's specifically what we need to do, a plan. Nobody's ever presented the American people with a plan. And I think they dumb the American people down and they don't treat the American people like adults. That's one way I think you could do it. The second way is a crisis. And that's the way we're currently headed towards, is creating a crisis. We're now with COVID-19, by the end of this year, the United States government will be $25 trillion in debt. That's one way that you could have a crisis. The current COVID-19 situation and the way that's being handled, that's kind of creating a crisis. We have a situation with climate change in this world where our planet is 2 degrees warmer than it was 120 years ago. And you might say, well, that's not really that big of a deal. Well, if I took your temperature and it's supposed to be 98.6 and it's 100.6, you're sick. And that's where we are as a planet. And that's why there are California wildfires. And that's why Houston's had 3 500-year floods in the last 5 years. And that's why Australia was on fire for 3 months last year. Our planet is being destroyed. And that's an example of a crisis. If you take a look at the health crisis we have in the United States, 40% of our fellow citizens are obese. If you take a look at the majority of people dying from COVID-19, do you know what they have in common? They either have a pre-existing condition or they're obese.
Right.
Those are the two biggest factors. And yet none of our government leaders, in the 1970s, our government leaders said, you know what? They came to the conclusion in the 1960s that smoking was killing people. And so we did something about it. We put a big message on a pack of cigarettes. Warning, the Surgeon General says if you continue to smoke these, you will die. And we took the tax on cigarettes and we cranked it up, and fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer people smoke cigarettes. And so the government can have an impact on people's lives in a very positive way. And yet we're currently, in the last 60 years, the average American has put on 30 pounds. And we use more drugs in this country than any other country by like 3x. And one of the reasons why we do is because so much of our population is way overweight that they need all these medicines.
Right.
And if you ever hear these stories about these people who are really overweight and they lose a bunch of weight, they will say, it's unbelievable. I'm no longer taking this medicine. I'm not taking this medicine. I'm not taking this medicine. And I feel the best I've ever felt. We had a guy at Trek go through our health program and he lost 80 pounds. He was going to have 2 knees replaced. He didn't have to have either one of his knees replaced. And he said not only did his health get significantly better, the same thing happened for all of his kids. So all these things can be done.
Well, interestingly, on the drugs, so the drug and food sort of combination, a lot of people say, well, food starts with a drug. It's called sugar. There's sugar in everything that is made, almost sugar in everything that is made. And we've been taught that because tasting good means it must be good. That's sort of the marketing behind it. I had a fellow named Naveen Jain on my podcast. He runs a company called Viome, which is a microbiome company. They test your microbiome. And he is convinced that food is the medicine that cures almost everything. You eat the right food.
Oh, wow.
You eat the right food, you live longer and you don't get sick. You eat the wrong food, like you were saying, you eat the wrong food, you live shorter and you get sick. It's like,
I completely agree.
Yeah, he's on a mission to basically reverse all chronic disease with food. And he says, because I asked him, I said, well, how are you going to do that when you got this huge marketing force of food companies that's totally against what you're saying? This is the product they're selling. He said, in the future, if you're not making customized food for people, you'll be out of business. Now, I don't know if that's pretty bold. It's like a playbook.
Yep.
But anyway, it ties to kind of what you were saying about the issues with healthcare. What did he say? It's not the ill, it's whatever ill you have, I'll give you a pill, is sort of what he said, instead of just telling people, hey, let's just be responsible for yourself, right? Because ultimately it's going to cost everybody less, but you're going to feel better. You're the one that wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where's the government? 99, even when Obamacare was being passed, 99.9% of the conversation was about paying for your hospital stay, paying for your pills, paying for all the drugs. And none of the conversation was, how do we create a healthy society that doesn't need the drugs and doesn't need to go to the hospital and lives a longer, more fulfilling life?
Right. Well, you had
See, I was going to be that first presidential candidate out there telling people that one of the ways that they can help is that they can be fit, they can eat better, and they can lose weight, and they can substantially reduce their healthcare cost, and they can feel 10 times better and lead a more fulfilling life.
Right.
Have you ever heard that from a presidential candidate?
I've only heard it from the first ladies. It seems like that's a role that gets relegated to them.
Exactly. Yeah, and they go out and make a garden.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the specifics, John, and you can talk about whichever of the 16 you want to. I've got thoughts and notes on all of them, but
pick a card.
So let's talk about let's talk two things: the tax code and the gasoline tax. And
Great. The gasoline tax. I love the gasoline tax. We have the largest economy in the world, and the Society of Engineers rate the transportation system in the United States as a D+. I've traveled all over the world. I've traveled to Europe a couple of hundred times in my life. I've traveled to Asia 100 times in my life. I've been almost everywhere, and I can vouch for that. Our transportation system is horrible, and it's getting worse. And the reason it is that a certain amount of people convince the American people that taxes are bad and that we're not going to raise taxes. So the gasoline tax, which funds the roads, hasn't been raised, I think, since 1993. How would you like it if you were doing the same job for the last 30 years and you never got a raise?
Right. Yeah, no fun.
And so the cost of materials has gone up, the cost of labor has gone up, and we have a lot more miles of roads to take care of, and yet we have 40 to 50% less dollars to do it with. All because nobody will increase the tax because that's not a good way to get elected. And there's a bunch of lobbyists who have convinced people that you can't raise the gas tax. The gas tax is the perfect tax. The people who are using the roads pay gas taxes, and therefore they're paying for the improvement in the roads. And my whole point is, let's not raise the gas tax by 5 cents. Let's raise the gas tax by $1.
$1, yeah.
And let's create the greatest transportation system. Eisenhower did this in the 50s. He created the greatest transportation system in the world with the interstate highway system. That's how you have a great economy. Part of the foundation of a great economy is to have a great transportation system. And, we can do it here. If you take a look at our gas taxes, they're the second lowest in the world, I think, with the exception of Mexico. And a lot of times you get what you pay for, and we don't have any money. And so we're not able to do the basics of transportation, let alone do some amazing things. And I believe, and it's also a great way if you want to create an incredible jobs program and put millions of people to work in high-paying jobs, increase the gas tax. And the other benefit of the gas tax is that people would say, I want to use less gas. And gas is a bad thing. It is burning a fossil fuel, which is heating up the environment. And if you increase the gas tax, people are going to buy cars with higher gas mileage or electric cars. And it's just like increasing the price of cigarettes. People are going to smoke less cigarettes. And you can get a couple of really good things done.
Okay. But if that's, so the gas tax, for one thing, is maybe even hasn't been changed, but it actually fundamentally has gone down because cars, trucks, everything gets higher gas mileage than it did in 1993. But if the dollar, and I do think that, so, and there's kind of a two sides to the sword here, because fracking has brought the price of gas, natural gas and oil down dramatically, right? But it contributes to climate change. But because it brought it down so much, it created the opportunity for a much larger gas tax without it impacting people's pocket the way that it would if gas was still, $3 or $3.50 or whatever a gallon, like it was pre-fracking. But then with the dollar being an incentive for electric cars and stuff, so once you get electric cars, the gas tax goes, to nothing at that point. So you have to replace it with something because you still need roads.
Yeah. So you would go to vehicles per mile used, and you would adjust the tax. But we get back to the issue of sacrifice.
Yeah.
And if you want to have a great nation, part of a great nation is a great transportation system. Right now, our transportation is a D+. It's getting worse by the day. And the citizens really need to answer a very simple question. Do you want a great transportation system? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, then you need to say, well, if you want that, you need to pay for it, and this is the price. Do you still want it? And I believe, and this is where I think we lack leadership. I don't think the problem is with the people. I think the problem is with the leader. I don't think anyone's gone out and has made the case for having a great transportation system and the need to pay for it.
Right.
And that's my whole thing is let's get all this stuff out on the table and let's deal with them all. Let's be a great country.
Right.
Not just by saying it. Let's do it by doing it. Let's make some sacrifices. Let's work hard. Let's get some things done.
I guess I wonder though if like people who don't have your global experience don't have an awareness of what what an A+ transportation system looks like. Maybe I don't know. Maybe and they're like, well, I don't know. I get to work and I'm just maybe they just don't know.
Well, some people don't know, but there's a lot of people who are dissatisfied with the transportation system.
Yeah.
And I think that, people could go out and they could make the case. And there's actually a bunch of people in government who are involved in transportation issues who know how much better we could do. They just need some funds.
Right.
Let me ask you a question. Do you want to spend $494 billion over the next 10 years upgrading our nuclear missile arsenal? Or do you want to spend that money on the world-class transportation system?
So can I put that off answering that till we get back to the rest of the tax code? And then I'd be happy to go there because I'd be interested to explore that more. So you're going to I believe it's simplifying the tax code to 10 pages or something was what you had in the book, but 10 pages, yeah. And I think it's kind of so it seems like everybody's interested in simplifying the tax code except everybody wants it simplified for someone else but not for them.
That's true. That's true. So here's the crime. You want to know the crime of the whole thing?
Yeah.
Here's the crime. The crime is that there's only like 25% of the population that uses the 2,500 page tax code. It's the wealthiest people in this country who use the tax code. They're also the ones making all the campaign contributions. And that's how you get some very wealthy people who pay very little in taxes. It's because you have a tax system that has so many loopholes in it because campaign contributors want to see a loophole and that senator, that congressperson makes that happen. That's how you get 2,500 pages.
And the senators and Congress people are largely in that bucket of wealthy people too. So they are also probably get personal advantage off of some of the things that other people wouldn't, like normal people, right?
Right. So normal people, they just sit there and they go, okay, well, I don't have a whole bunch of deductions. I made $40,000 this year and it says I need to pay this and my taxes are $4,312.
Right.
And there aren't 80% of the people, there aren't any deductions. And then, the New York Times came out with something that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. Supposedly he's worth $3 billion and he paid $750. I got my hair cut the other day at the barber shop. I asked the woman cutting my hair, I said, who are you voting for? She goes, well, I'm not voting for Donald Trump. I pay more in taxes than he does. It's not a joke.
No, it's not a joke at all.
It's true. And it just amazes me in this country that people tolerate that.
Right.
This is white collar crime. And it's so complicated that nobody understands it.
That's true.
It's so freaking.
I can't do my taxes. I tell you that.
I've never done my taxes.
You have no idea.
Right, and it's way too complicated.
So in your in the 10-page plan, John, just break it down for us. What's it gonna? What would it be?
Well, I said 10 pages, and I actually my goal would be to get it to 1. I really believe that You know, this is so bizarre. You know, that income isn't income. Like there's income and then there's dividends.
Yeah.
Okay, so how many
Yeah.
how many taxpayers actually get dividends? Right? And
Only the
so
people who
dividends,
have only the people who have enough money to have investments that pay dividends.
right. And so I mean, okay, I'm one of those people.
Yes, me too.
And I think it's ridiculous. So you're telling why isn't all income just income? That's where I would start. Whatever you make, whether it's a dividend, a salary, it's all that's income that you have. You start out with the income, and all you say is, listen, if you're in this tax bracket, you pay 40%. If you're in this tax bracket, you pay 30, 20, and in my plan, those brackets come way down because I think I had 10 tax deductions, which apply to most Americans. You know, it's like the interest on your house. A lot of the ways that people are able to afford a house is they can deduct the interest. Okay, I left that one in there. But I get rid of 95% of the deductions, maybe more like 99%. And you just totally simplify the tax code, and everybody should be paying their fair share. This is what we pay for our government, our democracy, our civilization. We should be happy to pay the check.
Right.
And instead, what do we do? What do we encourage as a society? To see how much I can deduct from what I really owe. And right. I don't think that's right. And I can't believe that you couldn't get a large portion of Americans to agree to simplify the tax code and get rid of all the deductions that favor the wealthiest people in this country.
Yeah.
It's kind and I also think if you ever want to run for president, you ought to provide your financial statements so everybody can see everything. And we've had every presidential candidate do that in the history of this country with one exception, and that's Donald Trump.
Right.
And if you want to run for president in this country, part of the entrance fee should be, here are my taxes.
So let's move over to nuclear weaponry, because I think people could use an education on that. Because first of all, I feel like most people think that there's, you talk in your book about, the codes, the president has. I feel like a lot of people don't understand weaponry. They don't have an appreciation for how many weapons there are, what they're potentially used for, or why we have them in the first place, where they are throughout the world, and all of that. And you've obviously studied it. I'd appreciate your perspective on that, and the reasons why you feel like such a dramatic decline in the total number of them is smart business, smart for the country.
So the United States currently has somewhere around 6,200 nuclear weapons. And these are weapons that are somewhere around 100 times more powerful than the nuclear warheads dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. They are unbelievably powerful. So that's just the scale of what we possess. The second thing that people should know is that nuclear accidents can happen. And in 1961, a B-52 flying over North Carolina crashed, and they had two nuclear bombs on board that did not explode. I mean, there are situations where when Carter was president, his national security advisor was woken up and was told that there was a nuclear attack being made by the Russians. And he was called a second time that, in fact, there was an attack. And he was waiting for one more call, I think the third call, to wake up the president. And it turned out it was a false warning. And, there's situations in Russia where Yeltsin was woken up, and he did not react. He didn't push the button. And when you have all these computer systems in place, computer systems have problems. And we're one accident away from blowing up the world. And nobody wants to talk about this. There's a bulletin of atomic scientists made up of a bunch of Nobel laureates, and they have a clock to judge where we are in terms of a threat. That threat today is 30 seconds to midnight. Midnight is when the world blows up. It is the closest to midnight it has ever been, including the Cuban Missile Crisis.
So when you reduce...
That's where we are, and
Right.
we currently have a government. The plan in our government is to spend $495 billion over the next 10 years to improve our nuclear capabilities. And we also know that one of the smartest guys who's worked in the government in the last 30 years was Colin Powell, who was Ronald Reagan's, he ran the National Security Council for Ronald Reagan. He was chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He was the Secretary of State. And what he said is when he left the Joint Chiefs, he really came to the conclusion that one thing he was convinced of is that nuclear weapons were useless.
Because?
What are you going to do with them? Are you going to push the button? And yet we keep doing the same thing over and over again. And as a nation, we have all these other needs. And I get back to that question about, do you want to spend $494 billion upgrading the nuclear arsenal, or do you want to improve your transportation system? Or do you want to improve public education? You put that on the ballot, and what do you think would come back?
Right.
But you have this huge lobby from the Defense Department and from these guys who are manufacturing those nuclear missiles. They're making a fortune, and they want to keep doing it. And we don't have these conversations in presidential campaigns because we're talking about who's a loser and how big your hands are and who slept with who.
Yeah, it's like, right.
And we keep dumbing people down.
I find it amazing that whether it's a presidential election or whether it's a local election, when we're spending more time trying to make the case that the other person is lying to you, and this is what we're arguing about, to decide who's the best person to represent us with integrity and everything else. So it's like, really, it seems like those should be things that are completely off the table, because if they were on the table, you wouldn't be there for consideration. Because in the rest of the world, if that's who you are, really, you don't get to sit at the table with other people who are trying to get stuff done. You're out the door. If you can't tell the truth and you can't do this and you can't do that, you're kind of unemployable. But it certainly doesn't seem to be that way when it comes to our election cycle. Now, I don't think people really believe that about each other, but that's what they feel like they have to do in order to get elected. Yeah.
Right. And so, unfortunately, the game is who can get elected instead of who's going to do the best job for the people.
Right.
And conduct the people's business. That's what it should be.
So I want to ask you about public unions, because so the nice thing about your nonpartisan solutions is that some people see them probably as being on one side of the issue. Some people probably see them as being on the other. But it's not something that they're used to seeing, because they're used to seeing everybody on one side or everybody on the other side. There's nobody who believes something about each. It's kind of funny when we always have party line votes. I mean, come on, really? No one believes, there's not one person in the whole group who believes that this other, option is a good one or a better one. But public unions, what's your feeling about public unions?
It's different when it's the government, because the government is us. You're already being represented. Franklin Roosevelt, who's one of the greatest presidents in the history of the United States, and the man who really made it, Franklin Roosevelt's the guy who came up with Social Security. Franklin Roosevelt came up with many of the cornerstone programs that still exist today. And what he said was, public unions that's a dangerous idea.
Right. He was
people,
against them. Yeah.
People are already represented by the people. And I just take a look at your chances of dying. Your chances, if you're in a public job, your chances of dying are higher than they are being fired. Nobody gets fired if you work for the government. And I'll tell you, I had experience I was on the President's Council for Physical Fitness and Sports. And so I had a part-time job on that. And so I was involved with a lot of people who worked in the government. And there were some great people. And then there were some C and D players. And you could not get rid of the worst performers. These are the people who are working for you and me.
Right.
So there should be something on the ballot that should say something like this. Do you want to be able to fire the worst performing people in the government, or should they be able to hold on to their jobs for life? Which one are you for? And you should put that to a vote. And I'm all for paying people really well, giving great benefits, and creating a great place to work. And I'm also for taking employees who are not doing a good job, sitting them down, letting them know exactly what they need to do to keep their job and to excel at their job. But if they can't do that, they should be moved off the bus, because the citizens deserve to have an awesome government.
Right.
I mean, we should get the best service in the world, and we don't.
Yeah, I think there's. So I agree. To me, unions are all about value proposition, and in the public unions, there's no value proposition, and here's why. This is what I think. The reason there's no value proposition because the politicians are responsible for negotiating with the unions, and what politician is not going to negotiate with the union, right? That's just like guaranteeing votes. So they're basically, I look at it as a tax on everybody. So you're taxing everybody to have a union, which has no accountability because you don't care. You're only going to be there for so long and you're going to leave, but you're creating you're creating sort of voting in perpetuity.
As taxpayers, we should say, is that what we want? I mean, it'd be like the Green Bay Packers saying, you know what? Everybody here, you're a lifer.
Yeah, right.
You can drop every pass that Aaron Rodgers throws to you, and that's okay, Tommy. You're still the wide receiver because we put you there and we can't make a change. You're always going to be our guy. And even if you want to be sick for some of the games, that's fine.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to show up. I mean, you're on the team.
Right. I'm not a fan of government unions. I just don't think it makes sense for our country. The people, this is a democracy. The people own the government, and we should want the best running government in the world. That should be, we have all these companies at Trek. We knock ourselves out every day. We're trying to be the absolute best in the world at what we do. And in order to do that, we need an incredible team. And we have an amazing team here, and we work really hard to make sure that we do.
Yeah, I know one of the things that stuck with me when I was, attending that event was when you said, we only make awesome stuff. We only make awesome stuff. We used to make stuff that wasn't awesome. And you said, we don't make stuff that's not awesome anymore. We only make awesome stuff, which is kind of what you're saying about the government. We have an opportunity to be awesome. Why not just be awesome?
Yeah. And in order to do that, somebody needs to set high standards. And when you set high standards, I once had we had Admiral McRaven, and I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's the guy who wrote the book Make Your Bed, and he was the guy who was in charge of the bin Laden raid. And he is one of the most impressive people that I have ever met. And one of his leadership tenets is set high standards, hold people accountable. And the higher you set the standards, the higher the performance is going to be, and the more pride you're going to have in the Corps.
Right.
And that's the same for the military. It's also the same for a country. It's the same at a school. Set high standards, hold people accountable. Set low standards, don't hold anyone accountable.
Right.
And I don't want to play on that team.
There was another thing that you introduced us to, or I hadn't heard about it before, and I want to see how you connect it to government. You have something at Trek called DRI, Directly Responsible Individual, and you break your business up into a bunch of units, I guess, each with one DRI, right? The buck stops with one person. Can you talk about what that is and how maybe that could be applied to government as well, or how you were intending to apply that? I don't know. I
was. One of the things that we do at Trek is we've taken Trek and we've broken it into 424 pieces. And for each one of those businesses, there's a DRI, direct responsible individual. That person is in charge. Now that person has a team of people to work with. They don't work in isolation, but if there's ever an issue, there's one person who's responsible. And the beauty of that is it spreads out the ownership of the company. Instead of having one owner, you have 424 owners. And, I think it's worked out incredibly well at Trek. And I really believe that you could do exactly the same thing throughout the government. And every one of those people, every one of those business owners has to have a plan. And you have to be able to say on a quarterly basis, this is the good and the bad happening in my business. You have to be able to say, these are my objectives and my goals for my business. And then you need to be able to say, this is what I need help with. I mean, just imagine if you spread that through the entire government so that everybody would know what your objectives are. Do you know what the objectives are of the Defense Department?
Keep America safe? I don't know.
I don't know.
Protect the world? I don't know.
It'd be nice to know. I mean, do you know what Secretary of Transportation, do you know what his objectives are?
Keep the trains moving.
I don't know. He's running one of the worst transportation systems in the world.
Right.
What are you trying to do? Tell me. I think it would be fascinating. This is where I think there's this massive educational gap between the people and the leadership. And the people don't know all the facts. And that's why, if you pick up the book, this is my first advertisement. If you pick up the book, Presidential Playbook 2020, you can go to the website, download it for free, or go to Amazon and you can buy it. Every one of the chapters I start out with, here are the facts. For 16 of our biggest challenges, here are the facts, and then here are the simple solutions.
And it's laid out just like that.
Just like that.
I got it from Apple Books or whatever too, so you can get it there too.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Two final questions for you, John. One, with climate change. So I wonder what you think about a solution to climate change, technological solution to climate change that will there be one, and will there be one when the time is right? Because one of the things that I spend a lot of time with people who say they're big thinkers, and you get the sense that carbon sequestration or sucking carbon out of the air or out of the atmosphere is possible, for example, and it will become something that's ubiquitous once the economics are right or whatever. But do you think that the technology will solve some of like that's a science problem that seems like there could be a solution to it. I don't know what it would be, but like that or something else.
Okay, so this is what I think. I visualize a boiling pot of hot water. And if you drop a frog in the boiling pot of hot water, he jumps out. He realizes he faces death and it's a crisis and he jumps right out. And I equivocate a boiling pot of hot water to COVID-19. As a country, we know COVID-19 is a massive problem. And so we're doing everything that we can to develop a drug, to develop medicine that people can take so that they can be all set. And we're working hard on that vaccination. We're doing everything we can. Now, if we go over to that boiling pot of water and we just have a regular pot of water, and it's not boiling, and we put a frog in there, he just sits in there. And then we crank it up 1 degree a minute.
Right.
And what happens is the frog gets used to the environment, gets a little warmer, this is fine, he just gets used to it, and ultimately the frog boils to death. That is what's happening to the world right now in regards to climate change. We talked about it earlier. The planet's 2 degrees warmer. We got fires destroying California. We've got fires in Australia, 3 500-year floods in Houston. 97% of scientists say humans are causing global warming, and global warming is going to get worse with time. We have people saying that it's 2 degrees now, the Earth is going to be 6 degrees warmer by the turn of the century in 80 more years. If that happens, I don't think the human race exists. I think we're done. So then the question becomes, should we be dealing with this problem now, when all the ice caps are melting and we're getting coastal flooding and we got 3 500-year floods and the state of California is on fire? Or should we keep waiting until somebody figures out this magic technology that's going to pull carbon out of the air? And I would say that we should be doing everything we can be doing right now to deal with climate change. Everything. And if somebody comes out with this incredible technology in 5 years that sucks carbon out of the air, that's awesome. But what if they don't?
Right.
I saw something on TV the other night. They showed the Great Barrier Reef. Like 30 years ago, they showed all the fish swimming in the Great Barrier Reef. And then they showed it the way it is now. It was a ghost town because the reefs have been destroyed. I heard something. It's like if you take a look at animal life on planet Earth, it's like been reduced 40% in the last 50 years. We're destroying the planet. It's not a popular platform to run for president on because people want happy talk. But the reality is we're destroying the planet. And the reality is that we could be, and I really put this out because I don't want to be Debbie Downer, is I really believe America's best days could be, underline, could be ahead of us. And that's why I said it's 16 nonpartisan solutions to save America. You could fix climate change and you could take massive steps forward in a short amount of time. And you will know when the United States is serious about climate change, whenever there is a tax put on carbon. And George Shultz, and I think it was Jim Baker, and it was backed up by a lot of businesses, said put a tax on carbon and then give the dividend back to the people. But for the people who are putting all this carbon into the air, it would make it economically not attractive to pollute anymore. And you would use the market forces. This is a great market-based idea. Just like when you raise the price of cigarettes, people smoke less. You raise the price of carbon, people are going to pollute less. We only have one planet.
Well, John, that's a great place to end. Thank you for being on the show today. Thank you for writing Presidential Playbook 2020 and explaining it, or at least some of it. We didn't get to nearly all of it, but I do encourage you to read the book, because even though John decided not to run and he talked about some of the challenges, there has to, whether his solutions are the right ones or not, there has to be a way to make better progress, but agreeing on sensible steps to move the country forward and all of our lives forward in responsible ways, or more responsible ways, or the most responsible ways. Let's put it that way. And getting something like this out there and having conversations around it is like everything else. It's the first step, right? Awareness, communication, and then education, right? That's how you get it done, I think.
That would be very helpful. And thank you very much for having me on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, John.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the How'd It Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at MikeMalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How'd It Happen podcast.